Welcome back to the first annual Halloween special. Today we're going to learn how to play the 2 to 6 player word-based card game Unspeakable Words by James Ernest and Mike Selinker and published by Playroom Entertainment. In Unspeakable Words, the players have been tasked with decoding the secrets of Riley by forming words with the letters that they find, where the more angles that appear in the word, the greater their mystical value. However, every time you make a word, you must check to see if the word's power drives you mad. Let's get to the table and let's see what's in the box. To set up the game, shuffle the letter deck and then give each player a hand of 7 cards. Then take the rest of the letter deck and place it in the center of the playing area. Then give each player 5 Cthulhu pawns. Any extra Cthulhu pawns that you have can be put back in the box. They will not be used. Each player will then roll the die. Whoever rolls the highest on the die will go first, re-rolling if there are any ties. Play will then proceed to go clockwise. Once you've determined who goes first, you are ready to begin. On your turn, there are 4 things you must do in the following order. First, you will form a word by displaying cards from your hand to form that word and place them in the playing area. You can form any English word you want as long as it has at least 3 letters, it is not a proper noun, an abbreviation, an acronym, or a contraction. One thing to remember is that plural versions of words count as separate words than a singular. Alternatively, if you do not want to make a word, or if you're not able to make a word with the cards in your hand, you can choose to simply discard those, setting them aside, and draw 7 new cards to fill your hand back up, ending your turn. If you do play a word, however, then you will score that word. How you score it depends on what letters you play and how much the numbers there are on each card. The numbers will total, and that will be the points that you will get for that word. For example, the amount of points you will score for the word main is 14. How you determine how many points a letter is worth depends on how many angles that particular letter has. For example, N has 2 angles, so it is worth 2 points. A, however, has 5 angles, so it is worth 5 points. Likewise, letters like U have no angles at all, so they're worth no points. Once you have scored the points for your word, make sure you write down the amount of points you scored for that word, and make sure you write down the word itself. And that is because once a word has been displayed, that word can never be displayed again by anybody for the rest of the game. Next, you will roll the sanity check. To pass the sanity check, you must roll a die and roll equal to or higher than the amount of points that you scored for that word. For example, I just rolled a 15 on a word that is worth 14 points, so I am okay. If you, however, roll less than the amount of points that you scored for a word, you will lose one of your Cthulhu pawns by simply setting it aside. A roll of 20 will always be a success no matter what word you played. Finally, you will draw back up to 7 cards and your turn is over. If you ever need to draw cards but the draw pile is empty, simply shuffle the discard pile to form a new draw pile. Once you have performed the 4 steps, your turn is over and play passes to the left. If a player ever loses their last Cthulhu pawn, they are said to have gone insane and are out of the game. There is a special rule that happens, however, when you are ever left with just 1 pawn. Whenever you are down to a single pawn, the normal rules for spelling will no longer apply to you. So you can make any word you want with any number of cards that you want and score it, regardless of whether or not it is gibberish. Keep in mind, however, when you play a word, when you have 1 Cthulhu pawn left, you do still have to roll the sanity check. If a player plays a word that would allow them to go over 100 points, they must succeed in their skill check in order to score that word. If the sanity check fails, then that word is worth 0. If it succeeds, however, the game ends immediately and that player wins the game. A player could also win the game if they are the last player standing with any Cthulhu pawns. That's basically it, but there's one card you need to know and a couple optional rules you might like to know before playing your first game. The card you need to know about is this unspeakable letter. This is basically a wild card. There's only one of these in the game, and if you use it as part of a word to complete it, that letter is worth however many Cthulhu pawns you have left. And like I said, there's a couple optional rules that you may want to know before starting. The first optional rule is hardcore. Hardcore basically means that a player must roll above the amount that they scored to avoid losing a pawn instead of rolling equal to or above. The next one is spellbinding. When a player discards their hand instead of making a word, other players can examine the cards in the discarded hand for words. Any other player may then force the discarder to form a legitimate word from those letters, rolling and scoring as normal. If multiple players point out words that can be created, the discarding player must then form the highest scoring word from those letters. After that, the player draws a new hand like normal. The third one is psychotherapy. When a player discards their hand, they can then roll the sanity check against the total value of that hand. And if they manage to roll higher than the total amount of points that hand would be worth, they can then regain a Cthulhu pawn. If they don't make it, nothing happens. You can never have more than 5 Cthulhu pawns in the game. Finally, you have last words. When one player reaches 100 or more points, each other player gets one more turn to try to beat them. The player with the highest score wins, and if there is a tie, the one who reached their final score first wins. And that is everything you need to know in order to play Unspeakable Words. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you want to learn my thoughts on Unspeakable Words, or if you want to learn how to play more games, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more tutorials, reviews, and unboxings. Thank you all as always so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.